Further debate, I recognize the member for Guelph.
Thank you, Speaker. I rise. It's always an honor to rise. I don't have a happy birthday wish for anyone, but I'm certainly happy to debate Bill 171, Enhancing Professional Care for Animals Act. And I just want to say that I was listening to the member from Quetnong's debate remarks, and his remarks really highlight the consequences of having a shortage of veterinarians across Ontario, but especially in the north. And so one of the reasons that I'll be supporting this bill is it's an important step towards addressing that shortage, but it's not going to be a sufficient step, and I'm going to talk about that in my remarks. But I do want to say that this is an important step forward in professionalizing and modernizing veterinary care in Ontario, and I think in particular recognizing the role that the college plays in providing regulation and governance, and doing that in a way where technology is changed. And I think Schedule 2 of the bill is particularly important, expanding the scope of registered veterinary technicians. When you talk to humane societies, when you talk to veterinarians, the ability for technicians to operate at their full scope of practice is a really important step forward, and it will hopefully allow more team-based veterinary care. I've been a strong advocate of team-based care, especially the primary care for people, and I believe we need more team-based care for animals as well, whether it's in agriculture or in with our pets. So, Speaker, I want to take a moment to talk about the fact that in Canada, each and every year, 350 veterinarians retire, and less than 350 veterinarians are educated to replace them. And that's been happening year over year over year. As a matter of fact, at the University of Guelph, which I'll just say the Ontario Veterinary College is Canada's top-rated veterinary college, top 5 veterinary college in the world, and the oldest veterinary college in all of North America, an outstanding treasure for our province and obviously for the city of Guelph, which I proudly represent. They have graduated 120 vets per year for the last 15 years. They need to graduate more vets. And they are going to start to graduate more veterinarians, but I think we need to even increase the number they're going to graduate. And I want to talk about the process that's enabled them to have a few more vets that they're graduating, and it relates to the comments from the member from Quetnong. And I think it demonstrates what can happen in this House, and it sometimes too rarely happens in this House, where we can work across party lines to get things done. So I want to give a quick shout out to the Minister of Agriculture and Rural Affairs, who I approached probably 2 years ago and said, people at the University of Guelph are telling me we need more veterinarians, and we need more veterinarians in the north, and they have a proposal they've put forward to partner with Lakehead University to make that happen. And I'll give a shout out to the member from Elgin, Middlesex, London, who I also approached as a graduate of the University of Guelph and said, can you help me work on this? We got to convince the minister, which was pretty easy to convince, but then we have to convince the Minister of Colleges and Universities that this is a good program to support, and we got that minister on board. And then leading up to the budget last year, I know budget day is next week, but leading up to the budget, we all did, I think, a pretty strong push to the Minister of Finance that should be included in last year's budget. And to me, it's an example of how we can work across party lines, and an MPP who may be in opposition but can still advocate for something good in their riding can actually work with government to get something in the budget. And so when Steve Paikin on the TVO agenda last year asked me, Mike, what's one good thing? Because I was giving the government a pretty rough time on the budget last year. And Mr. Paikin asked me, he's like, can you tell me one good thing in that budget? And I said, funding for the University of Guelph and Lakehead University to partner together to graduate 20 additional veterinarians each and every year over the next 4 years, hopefully 80 additional veterinarians with a focus on serving the north. And I want to say to the member from Quetnong, my hope is that members from Indigenous communities go to Lakehead, start their first 2 years in that program, and then come down to Guelph and tell them to reach out to the member for Guelph. Go to his office. He'll be there to support them, welcome them to Guelph, hopefully show them a good time in Guelph for the 2 years they study in Guelph so they can return back to the north and provide care for the dogs you talked about, and also provide care for the large animals in the growing farm sector we see in Northern Ontario, because that's something Ontario desperately needs. And it's something I can get behind, and I think all members of this House can get behind. But I want to make one final push to the Finance Minister before next week's budget. Our post-secondary educational sector needs more resources and support. And I know the government announced some additional funding, but it's going to be insufficient. And universities like the University of Guelph, who do so much to educate students, and their research does so much to promote our food and farming sector, and the Ontario Veterinary College does so much to support our ag sector and people's pets. Let's increase the number of spaces at OVC so we can even graduate more veterinarians to serve the people of Ontario. Thank you, Speaker.
Time for questions. I recognize the member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
Appreciate the member opposite's presentation. We agree on most things, not everything, but when it comes to our support and love and absolute support of the University of Guelph, being a graduate, we certainly share that in common. As I said yesterday in my remarks, throughout the pandemic it has been stated that we had over 1 million more pets or dogs in this country needing, obviously support for veterinary care, animal health. Where I think this legislation really helps is the expansion of vet technicians. Think of them as nurse practitioners in a veterinary sense. So can you speak to that in terms of how that will not only help companion animals, but in our large commercial farms as well?
Back to the member for Guelph.
Yeah, I appreciate the member's question. Expanding the scope of practice for veterinary technicians is critical to helping address the shortage of veterinarians we have. Absolutely. Think of how important it is to have our healthcare professionals for human health operating at their full scope of practice. Going to continue to push the government to do that, but it's a good thing that we're doing with vet technicians in this legislation. And I think it will create more opportunities, especially for team-based care. And prior to the pandemic, we had 1 in 5 veterinary practices actually reducing their hours of care. This will help reverse that trend.
Questions? I recognize the member for Hamilton West, Ancaster Dundas.
Thank you very much, Speaker, and I would thank the member from Guelph particularly for bringing up the important work that's done at the University of Guelph. Not only the Veterinarian College, but the Ontario Agricultural Centre. As you mentioned, we had the folks here from the Ontario OCUFA yesterday, Ontario College of University Faculty Association. I was lucky enough to have met with a woman that works at the Ontario Agricultural College who said that Guelph is running a deficit and is having a direct impact on faculty members at our institution. And she works in the plant agriculture lab, and they're losing 3 plant breeding faculty, which means that important crops for Ontario agriculture will have no public breeding and research, including corn, which is a predominant row crop grown in Ontario, and the research that they do to identify, resistant strains. So they were here saying that the universities need to be properly funded, that we are losing our edge that we have had in research and training because our universities are all running a deficit.
Question.
Can you speak to how this directly speaks to being able to implement and act on the intention of this bill, which is to have enough veterinarians and vet technicians to serve our animal friends?
Back to the member from Guelph.
Yeah, I appreciate the question from the member. You obviously must have spoke with Helen yesterday when she was here, and fantastic plant scientists. And you're absolutely right. They're going to be losing 3 positions, and that's going to directly affect research, especially for grains here in Ontario, which will negatively affect our agricultural sector, especially when it comes to disease-resistant plant breeding. So to me, it just highlights why it's so important to invest in our colleges and universities. The University of Guelph, like so many universities right now, are going through program reviews, which may mean the loss of certain courses and programs.
Response.
Certainly, we've seen a reduction in staff, which directly affects research, which then directly and negatively impacts our agri-food sector, which is a $50 billion contributor to our economy.
Question? Further questions? Further debate?